the series of the Guiding Star series. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept your efforts for His deen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our Salatul Maghrib, which we just performed for His sake and only for His sake. My brothers and elders, if you recall, for the past 2 Thursdays, we've been discussing the life of Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the amount of knowledge that is hidden in the life of Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu anhu is unimaginable. And the advices that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him are also many. Today, inshallah, I will share with you just a few of the many advices that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam shared with Mu'adh bin Jabal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. But before that, I want to share with you one hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whoever says upon leaving his house, Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah," that I begin my exiting of the house in the name of Allah, and I put my reliance and tawakkul upon Allah. There's no might and there's no power except by Allah Azza wa Jal. It is said to him when he exits his house that you are guided, you've been given hidayah, you are defended, and you are protected. So the shayateen, they talk to one another that let's just go far away from that person, because how could you now entrap a person who has been guided, protected, and defended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So therefore they give up on that individual. So this is one dua that I want to share with you tonight, that when we exit our homes, we should recite this dua each and every single time when we exit from our houses. Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. My brothers and sisters, there's a point that needs to be noted, and that point is very easily said, but to understand it, we need to go back in history. Once again, there's one point and one sentence that is very easily said, but the reality of it and the understanding of it can only be grasped if we were to open up the books of history. And that point is that this deen and Islam did not reach us with ease. The sentence is that the deen of Allah did not reach us with ease. It reached us through many sacrifices of Allah Azza wa Jal knows how many millions of Muslims and how many millions of our pious predecessors. So Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, one of the greatest pioneers of the scholars of the past, a great muhaddith who had a photographic memory, and he was a phenomenal muhaddith, and he is very much respected, and he's notable, and he's a noble individual from amongst his peers, amongst the muhaddithin. You know who his students are? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. These are his students. One of the 4 great madhabs, right? One of the imams is his student. He passed away in the year 233, and he was born in the year 158 after Hijri. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was born roughly about 60 or 70 years before Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah was born. So that itself tells you how great of an Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was, how much knowledge he had when he came to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, he was the elder from amongst his peers and these great scholars of the past. And the point that I will make is that the sacrifices that they had made, just so that today you and I can know the story of Mu'adh bin Jabal, just so that you and I can know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. You know, we need to understand the sacrifices that these pious predecessors of ours had made. So he had many great scholars under him. And there are many that we can mention, but I'm just moving forward very quickly. A man once came to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, and he said that look at all these ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Maybe he showed them or he recited them to him. And he said that there's so many mistakes in these ahadith. Why? Because people are constantly changing the words of the hadith. There is no phone that you can use to give a phone call to Yahya ibn Ma'in. That is this hadith true? How are the wordings of this hadith? People cannot email Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, Shaykh, I have a question. There is no center that you can email and that you can contact unless you travel Allah knows how many hundreds of miles, just so that you can know that this individual is a reliable scholar and he has memorized the hundreds and thousands of hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a lot of distortion and, as they say, manmani, and a lot of fabrications, they started to erupt in this era. In this era of the preservation of hadith. And remember, at this time, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and all the other 5 ai*imma of hadith, Imam Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, they weren't there. Right? They came later on. So Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, who is from amongst the teachers of even Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he embarked upon the journey of preserving the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the extent that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, when he was approached by this man, Imam Ahmad said to him that go to Yahya ibn Ma'in, for indeed he will know the answer, and Allah has created him for the purpose of preserving the hadith. Allah has created him for the purpose of the preservation of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah said in regards to Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah that he's a man that Allah created for this task. Why? Because he exposed the lies of the liars. And one example which we personally heard when I was a student from our muhaddith who was teaching us the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that since it was very difficult at that time to verify the validity of the hadith, right? They would have to travel, Allah knows, like I mentioned, how many hundreds and thousands of miles just so that they can verify one hadith. At that time, these great books of hadith were not there. This was the era in which the scholars, they came up with the concept of writing them in the forms of book, and then to have the students memorize all of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they started to give out the copies. Now, there was a food vendor who used to sell eggplants. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-habbatu sawda'u shifa'un li kulli da'. The siyadana, meaning the black seed, Allah has kept shifa in it. There's shifa in the black seed. That's why sometimes when a person wants to take a massage, they want to make sure that it's either olive oil or the black seed oil. Sometimes when a person has stomach pain, they say, eat these black seeds and etc. Right? The ancient people. Because it's in a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this street vendor, he was not selling and he was not doing well when he came to selling his eggplants. So he thought to himself that if I do not sell these eggplants by tonight, then they're going to rot by tomorrow and I will suffer a great loss. So he wrote there that قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, and he changed the word from al-habbatu sawda to al-badhinjanu shifa'un likulli da'. That the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept shifa in the eggplants and his business started to boom. Now, how are the people going to verify the validity of this hadith? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used Yahya ibn Ma'in and along with many other hundreds of scholars to preserve the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they made a separate book in which they wrote down all of the mawdu'at, the fake and the made up and the fabricated ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the people later on made up to satisfy their agendas and to fulfill their agendas. So this is the era of the preservation of hadith. Now, once again, the point that I'm trying to make is the sacrifices that these people made. Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, his father was a very rich individual, and he left his son Yahya ibn Ma'in an inheritance of over 1 million dirhams. So he became a multi-millionaire overnight. You know, if, for example, if my father right now gives me, $5 million, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to give it to sadaqah. What's the first thing that you and I are going to do? Purchase a Ferrari, an exotic car, purchase a Lamborghini. The house that I live in is 5 bedrooms. Now I need to go buy another house in Great Neck by the water. Right? That's how we think, right? And then maybe 50,000 from that 5 million, I will donate to Hillside Islamic Center. Right? That's the mentality that you and I have today. And let's be honest with one another. Very rarely we think out of the box. Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, he spent all the inheritance in traveling. When he came to preserving the hadith, he traveled throughout the world. In the Muslim countries, he met and he sat and he learned and memorized from various scholars, the top-notch scholars. And he spent all his money during the course of Allah knows how many decades and how many years. Today, we're remembering him 1200 years later in New Hyde Park. Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, you and I are indebted to him, and of course along with many other scholars. The ulama have mentioned in the book Safhat min Sabr al-Ulama. It's a book in which they have written down the stories of the struggles that the scholars of before went through in order to preserve the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that it is easy for the new generation. They were not worried about themselves because they knew the deen. They were worried about who? About the new generation. Today you and I would have been confused. But it is due to their efforts that we're not confused. So they wrote in regards to him that the scholars, they said that here comes a millionaire, but he does not even have money to purchase shoes. He was walking barefoot. Why? Because in the back of his mind, to him, spending his money in order to learn one hadith so that he can travel to the scholar and spend that money when it comes to traveling the scholar was more valuable to him than purchasing shoes. Look at how many books are over there. How many tafsir books, hadith books are kept in various shelves. When was the last time we picked up a book and we actually sat there with the intention of learning? How much free time do we have? Right? Many of us are off on the weekends. Besides using our phones, right, and backbiting, when was the last time I actually picked up a book? And some of us, we actually make ourselves feel good by downloading books on our phones. Right? The scholars, they say that if you want real ilm, right, then read a physical copy of the book. Why? Because the amount of knowledge that you receive from an actual physical copy of book is way more, and it will stay longer in our memory than that of from a digital platform. And I'll be honest with you. Right? I take the notes on my phone, I forget them. But when I take the notes on a piece of paper and keep it in the folder, in the file that I have for the bayans, that stays in my head for a longer period of time. When I Google an Arabic word and I find the translation, I know it at the moment. The next day you ask me about the meaning of that word, I will not remember it. But when I pick up an actual dictionary and I struggle and scroll through every single letter, every single word, every single sentence and paragraph, finally I find it, that stays in my head for a few weeks. I have personally experienced this. So we need to embark on the journey of ilm. And that was one of the quality that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they had. That the ilm that they had, the knowledge that they had, they were not satisfied with it. They wanted more. But the money that they had, they were satisfied with it. But we're the total opposite. The money that we have, we're not happy with it. We want more. As long as you're earning it through a halal source, no problem. But the ilm that we have, right? That's the same ilm that we had 20 years ago. There is no improvement. There is no progress when it comes to our knowledge and our ilm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the advices that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu are many. And I will only share with you very quickly 12 advices. The first one was very easy, very simple, the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second one was speaking the truth, which is very, very, very difficult. The third one, fulfilling promises. The fourth one, repaying back the trust, the amana that a person keeps with us, repaying and giving the amana back. Number 5 was that refraining from cheating and betraying. And you know, when the Prophet ﷺ was sending Mu'adh bin Jabal to Yemen, and when he was giving him this ilm, he expected him to teach this ilm and pass it along to the people of Yemen. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him that also be very lenient with your words. You know, the society is the total opposite. The tougher you are, the more stricter you are, the more mean and angry you are, then the more of a man you are. The Prophet ﷺ said to him that be very lenient with your words. That's the 6th advice. The 7th one was at-tafaqquhu fil Quran, which you and I lack in today's time. It is to have the deep understanding and the deep knowledge of the Quran. Some of us, we probably have the basic knowledge, right? The famous stories that are mentioned inside the Quran, and even those of us who know the Arabic language, we probably just know, the water that's floating on the ocean, the surface of it. But what's in depth, what's in the deep ocean, we have no idea. So at-tafaqquhu fil Quran is very crucial and essential for a person's spiritual growth. Number 8 was qasr al-amal. And he said to him that, O Mu'adh, decrease these hopes that you have. You know, sometimes we give ourselves these false hopes which most likely are not going to turn into reality. By the time they turn into reality, that is when we have hit the age of 70 and 80, that I will do this and then I will earn that much. In the process, salat is missed. Oh, zakat I cannot give because my money will then decrease. And then, you know, we have all these hopes, and I will do that investment and I'll do this and that. You know, they gave the example that a person once had, one egg in a basket, and he's walking with that basket, and he's thinking to himself that I will sell this egg for this much, and then I will go take that money, invest it, and then I will buy a house with it, and then I will buy a nice exotic car, and then I will move, into the beachfront houses, and I'll become a multi-millionaire. And it started all with the egg, and he bumped into one person, and the egg fell on the floor. So the man said to him that you're the one who bumped into me. You're supposed to say I'm sorry. He said, why should I say I'm sorry? My egg was worth how many millions? Right? Having all these false long hopes. So the Prophet ﷺ said that just have your reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not have these long false hopes. Number 9 was اذكر الله عند كل حجر وشجر. That, O Mu'adh, always remember Allah, that whether you are standing by a tree or a stone or a rock. In other words, at all the times, as a Muslim, at all times, you must be engaged in the remembrance of Allah. Remembrance of Allah does not only mean Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar, Astaghfirullah, facing the Qibla, and sitting in the masjid with the tasbih, doing the dhikr. No, anything that reminds us of Allah. The fact that we're sitting here, this is considered to be the dhikr of Allah. When we pick up an Islamic book or listen to an Islamic lecture, listening to the scholars on YouTube and etc., these are all considered to be dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 10th advice that he gave him was وَأَسْرِعْ فِي حَوَائِجِ الْأَرَامِلِ وَالضُّعَفَاءِ. That hasten and run towards helping the weak and of course the orphans and the widows, especially the widows, because they have no one to take care of them. So Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu was advised by the Prophet ﷺ that hasten when you find out about a widow, ask about her needs and fulfill the needs that she has. Number 11, لا تأخذك في الله لومة لائم. That those who blame you for the sake of Allah, do not let their blame affect you. Right? Today we're ready to change our Islamic identity. Why? Because we're ashamed of our Islamic identity. When we're going outside, when we're coming to the masjid, I do not want to look like a Muslim because what are the people going to think? Who are passing by me, they look at me, they grill me, they stare at me, right? We become very, insecure of our Islamic identity. So the blaming of the blamer, the Prophet ﷺ says, should not have an effect on you. The 12th one was, which I mentioned to you last week, that the Prophet ﷺ told him after every salah, make sure you recite the dua, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant me and all of us the ability and the tawfiq to act upon whatever was just said. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakum Allahu khairah.